Okay, before I start, does anyone want to take a quick stand up? Just get out of your seats very gently. And after me, 3, 2, 1, observability. Right, I'll start the brainwashing early. So I want you to imagine you're a pilot, so you've got a promotion. You're the head pilot for American Airlines, and you're flying a trip from London to New York. And you're on your airplane, and all of a sudden, your cockpit window just starts blurring out, and every information that you had about flight altitude, the performance of the engine, it's all gone. It's disappeared. And that's basically what it is like running mission-critical applications without observability. So imagine all of that clearing up. Now all of a sudden you can see the clear blue skies. You know exactly where your plane is, the altitude, any sort of temperature data that you need, you know, any planes that are close by, where your nearest airport is. All of that information is telling you about exactly what you need to get to the destination effectively. And that's what I like to use as an analogy for observability. So Neil Armstrong, when he landed on the moon, he famously said, reliability is the most important feature. No, he didn't. That was that's from the Google SRE handbook. So Google have a really good handbook that teach you about some of the core principles about running an application and some of the key things that you need. So whether that's observability, performance engineering, all of these different types of things, there's a really good handbook out there. And reliability is flagged up as not necessarily the most amazing, most visual thing, but it's very important to get right. And that's something that we've been doing here at the Grafana. So what do you need in an observability system? Fundamentally, you want it to be scalable, right? You don't want to be paying ridiculous amounts of money for a system. And I don't know if, I think it was Coinbase, there's a cryptocurrency provider. There was, in one of their recent earnings calls, their CEO flagged a massive multi-million-dollar bill. I think it was more than $10 million, which was like the total cost of their entire platform. And it was flagged out in one of their earnings calls, and they were asked, what is that? And it was actually the amount of money they were paying just to an observability tool to get all of that monitoring data out. So you need something that is going to be quite cost effective. You don't want to be paying ridiculous amounts for that. You need something that's cloud native. So again, I was talking to someone about Kubernetes and Docker, and the fact that you need to have your observability system working for the legacy infrastructure for those of you who still use mainframe, and for those of you who deploy in our lovely, great cloud-native land of Kubernetes and serverless and all of that. And the whole point of observability is not to observe for the sake of it. You want to be correlating between the different signals, your metrics, your logs, your traces, that tell you what went wrong, why something has gone wrong, where exactly that problem has occurred, and what you can do to maybe improve that. So as a show of hands, who actually runs an application where you're accountable to some level of service level agreement, or downtime, it results in business revenue risk for you? So there you go. So just proof that reliability is the most important feature, as Neil Armstrong said. So there's things that you need to consider when you get to this observability nirvana, right? Number one, visualization. So these are all the principles that we did when building Grafana as an observability tool. So we started off as just a dashboarding layer, data sources that come into Grafana. How are we going to visualize that in the most effective way possible? So then the next challenge was, okay, access. Hands up if anyone's heard of open telemetry or knows about open instrumentation, right? So about having open standards for the way we're going to actually define those signals. So when Java decides to create a metric about request rates or errors or latency or whatever, what is the standard language that we're going to use to actually instrument that and store that, and how we're going to have this common format, so to speak. Then it's the correlation. There's no point having going back to the airplane analogy, right? Everything is in one single cockpit. If I have to go back to the other end of the airplane to go and find some other data, right, that's going to be no use to me. I need it all in one single tool. I need to be able to correlate all of my reliability signals together. From that, starting to build actual things which get you to the root cause much, much quicker. SLOs and SLIs. another fun acronym for you. But actually, like, all of those speeds and feeds are well, but what does this mean in terms of the business? So if I'm an airline booking site, if I'm a software provider, if I'm whatever I am, I have some level of accountability towards the business revenue. And I want to make sure I'm only measuring what is going wrong accordance to what the business deems most important. I could be alerted on a server going down, but it might not be relevant for my availability uptime that I'm guaranteeing to my other third-party providers. So SLOs and SLIs help with that. And we want to get to this nirvana state where we talk about observability-driven development. So before we actually develop an application, we've done the performance testing, the chaos engineering, everything that needs to be done to get that fine-tuned, and we're really having observability as a first-class citizen, as opposed to just an afterthought that we're just whacking in once we build our app. So how does that relate to Grafana, the Grafana journey? If you look on the top left-hand side, you can see anyone who's played Call of Duty. I think it's in Modern Warfare 1 and 2, when Ghost goes in one of the command rooms, you can see some Grafana panels on top. So that's a nice little Easter bunny nugget for you. And then there's the SpaceX launch. Actually, when NASA did the Astra launch in 2022, we were shocked, because about 1 hour, 30 minutes in, the guy from Houston Control Tower says, switch your Grafana data sources to, I think, to another launch system. So we've popped up in the wild sometimes in areas where we don't even know. And that's where we started off, visualization, making a flexible dashboarding layer that allows you to actually hook in different data sources together and not be like some of the other folks out there in the observability market who are basically saying, in order to get data in, we want you to pay us millions and millions of dollars in the case of Coinbase. So leaving the data where it is super important. You need to have a good visualization layer. OpenTelemetry. So why is OpenTelemetry so important? I talked about open standards with application telemetry data. OTel only solves part of the vendor lock-in challenge. So if all of my application metrics and infrastructure metrics are all defined in a common language, that's all well and good. But whatever you ingest that into, whatever system that you're storing all of that data, it has to be able to support that in a nice manner. It has to recognize those semantic conventions, and it has to actually provide some relevancy there. And that's the kind of critical decision-making criteria we did when architecting some of our backend systems. Correlation, like I mentioned before. So what does correlation mean? So I want you to put this in the frame of mindset of an application. I have request rates for my application. Those are my metrics at the top. Those are stored in a time series database. When I actually want to drill into the logs that are telling me why an application might be erroring or so on and so forth, I look at that service name. I may do a log search, and I want to get to the logs directly from those metrics using this common label. So if my application is deployed in a particular cluster, I want to be able to easily get to the pod logs that might be relevant for that. And then within those logs, I want to look at a trace ID that's telling me, okay, which part of that application is erroring? Is it this particular microservice when it makes a call to my database, or is it another part of the stack? Because that's where you're hunting for the needle in the haystack. And going cloud native, as I'm sure the folks from Zuki know as well, going cloud native introduces some challenges in complexity around observability. Because if someone now goes for example, if you're an ASOS and you're running millions and millions of different microservices that all do their own little bit in isolation, you need to know where the problem is when someone says my checkout is not working, because it could be any one of these different microservices that are playing up. So you start from this is my problem. You go to a system level dashboard, component level, drill down into that, and actually look into the different data sources. I'll whiz through the next bit because I know we're tight for time. To summarize that, what I mean, a very logical flow for what we've designed in terms of the Grafana stack. When you get paged, you might have high latency, you might have an SLO that's violated. You drill down into a dashboard there that tells me whether that service is erroneous or not. Maybe explore and follow different hypotheses. So I actually want to investigate why that problem might be occurring, and then look into the logs and traces off the back of that. And to wrap that up, right? And this is just some golden nuggets around observability. But again, I'm around if you want to ask me questions. 3 key principles that we did when designing observability at scale. Number 1, the system has to be able to store metrics, logs, traces, profiles, all of the data that I want cost effectively. There's no point paying an arm and a leg for it. Number 2, it has to be cloud native. It has to integrate with the likes of Kubernetes and the cloud native services as well. And it has to be able to give me seamless correlation between all of the different signals. Am I okay for time? A few more questions. Okay, so I'll open the floor to any questions, if anyone has any. Cool, I stunned everyone into silence. If you want, so if you do happen to be a user of Grafana or have any questions, we have a community Slack channel group. It's grafana.slack.com. I am on there, and you can reach out to me on LinkedIn as well if you've got any questions running. Oh, I've got one there.
So I've seen a couple observability tools that are specifically targeting LLM applications around like the tracing and prompts and things like that. Is Grafana doing anything specifically there, or are there generic dashboards that are sort of rated?
It's to be announced, yeah. If you follow Grafana Con or like some of the community events that we do, we'll probably announce it at one of those. But yeah, we are. But our principle is we tend to dog food all of that internally. And there's some like pilot alpha customers that are doing it at a large scale. But at some point, we will come with LLM observability, like guns blazing. And you'll see some nice stuff in Grafana for that.
Right. So I think in terms of observability space, there's quite a lot of observability platforms which are specifically targeted using Kubernetes cluster. Even though that's essentially the platform where they kind of build a lot of observability platforms around it. But you do see right now applications which are more of streaming applications, and I think just to add on that other question of LLM applications which are kind of outside the space of Kubernetes. So are those platforms already kind of covers those, or
yeah, so if anyone's familiar with Prometheus, it kind of just became the de facto standard by default for like, Kubernetes and Linux. As we're going into LLM, we're seeing more of that usage. But again, it's like, LLM is that stage where everyone loves talking about it, but productionizing it and doing it at scale now is what people are trying to solve the problem for. It's the same days of like Kubernetes back in like when it shifted out of being Google's, Borg and Borgmon. So I think it's in its embryonic stages, but as we're starting to do more of that, like I was at a Skyscanner meetup and they were talking about how they use LLMs for some of their actual flight searches, I think that will be the next realm of observability that we need to target. And again, that is something that we're actively developing for.